BRAHMA PURANA, Part 2. Om Shakti Hrim, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayana, Om Sachitakam Brahma, Hrim. Rishi Gautama. Part of the water of the Ganga that got stuck in Shiva's hair was brought down to us by Bhagirath. The remaining part was brought down by the sage Gautama. Parvati was married to Shiva, but Shiva seemed to be fonder of Ganga than of Parvati. Parvati resolved that a way had to be found to remove Ganga from Shiva's hair. She tried persuasion, but Shiva refused to listen. At this time there was a terrible drought on earth, which went off for 14 years. The only place that was not affected by the drought was the sage Gautama's hermitage. Other people also gathered in the hermitage to save themselves from the drought, and Gautama welcomed them all. Ganesha thought that he might be able to devise a way to free his mother of the Ganga problem. He went and began to live in Gautama's hermitage. Ganesha cultivated the acquaintance of the other sages and became quite friendly with them. One of Parvati's companions was Jaya. Ganesha told Jaya that she was to adopt the form of a cow and eat up the grain in Gautama's fields. At the moment she was struck, she was to lie down on the ground and pretend to be dead. Gautama noticed that a cow was eating up his grain. He tried to drive away the cow by striking it with a blade of grass. As soon as he did this, the cow uttered a shrill bellow and fell down on the ground. Ganesha and other sages came running to see what had happened. They discovered that to all intents and purposes a cow had been struck down dead by the sage Gautama. They therefore refused to stay in an ashrama where such a sin had been committed. Gautama tried to restrain them. "Please do not go away and forsake me," he said. "Tell me how I may perform penance." "You will have to bring down Ganga from Shiva's hair," replied Ganesha. "When that water touches the dead body of the cow, your sin will be forgiven." Ganesha was so friendly with the other sages that they all accepted his solution. Gautama also agreed to do the needful. Accordingly, Gautama went to Mount Kailasa and began to pray to Shiva. Shiva was pleased at Gautama's tapasya and offered to grant a boon. Gautama naturally wanted the boon that Ganga might be brought down to earth. Shiva agreed. It was thus that Ganga was brought down to earth by the sage Gautama. Ganga has 4 tributaries in heaven, 7 on earth and 4 in the underworld. Since it was Gautama who brought Ganga down to earth, the river is also known as Gautami Ganga. In mountain known as Brahmagiri, there used to live a hunter who was very cruel. He not only killed birds and animals, but Brahmins and sages as well. The hunter once went on a hunt. He killed many animals and birds, and some he put in his cage. And he had penetrated so far inside the forest that he was far from home. It became night and also started to rain. Hungry and thirsty, the hunter lost his way. He climbed up a tree and decided to spend the night there. But his mind kept going back to his wife and children at home. For many years a dove and its family had lived happily on the tree. Both the male and the female had gone out to look for food. But also the male dove had returned to the nest. The female dove had not. In fact, the female had been captured by the hunter and was now inside a cage. The male did not know this. He mourned for his wife. These words of mourning were heard by the female dove inside the cage, and she made her presence felt. The male dove came down and discovered his wife inside the cage. "The hunter is sleeping now," he said. "Now is the time for me to free you." "No," replied the female dove. "You know how it is with the living beings. One living being lives on another. I can find no fault with the hunter. He is merely collecting his food. He is like a guest to us, and it is our duty to offer up our body for the sake of a guest." "You are quite right," says the male dove. "I lost my sense of propriety. We have to serve our guest. But how do we serve our guest? We have nothing that we can call our own. At the moment the hunter is suffering most from the cold," replied the female dove. "We have to light a fire to warm him up. Go and find a fire and bring plenty of dead leaves and branches so that the fire may burn." The male dove found a flaming branch. He also brought many dry leaves and branches so that the fire could burn. The rain had stopped and the fire warmed up the hunter. "Now," said the female dove, "free me so that I may immolate myself in the fire. My roasted flesh will serve as food for the hunter." "Never," replied the male dove. "It is my right to serve the guest first." Saying this, the male dove hurled himself into the fire. The hunter had heard the entire conversation and marveled that two doves could be so altruistic. The female dove now requested the hunter to free her from the cage, and as soon as he did this, the female dove also hurled herself into the fire. This selfless deed of the two doves was so wonderful that a space Vimana came down to take the two doves straight to heaven. The cruel hunter was also impressed and repented his past misdeeds. He told the doves, "You are indeed blessed. Before you go to heaven, please tell me how I may perform penance for my sins." "Go to Gautama Ganga and bathe there for 15 days, replied the doves. "Your sins will also be forgiven." The hunter did as he had been asked to. The place where the doves immolated themselves became a holy tirtha known as Kapota Tirtha, since the word Kapota means dove. You have already been told about the great snake Naga Ananta. Ananta had a son named Maninaga. Garuda was the enemy of the snakes, and the snakes were all afraid of Garuda. Maninaga began to pray to Shiva. Having pleased Shiva, he obtained the boon that Garuda would be able to do him no harm. Armed with the boon, Maninaga started to wander around freely and did not run away even when faced with Garuda. Garuda found this to be exceedingly strange. Also, he could not kill Maninaga. He captured him and kept him imprisoned in his own house. Shiva had a companion named Nandi. Nandi told Shiva, "Lord, what has happened to Maninaga? We have not seen him for some time. I hope that Garuda has not done him some harm." Shiva of course knew what had happened. He advised Nandi to pray to Vishnu. Nandi was to please Vishnu and then ask for the boon that Maninaga might be freed from Garuda's imprisonment. Nandi did this, and Vishnu asked Garuda to release Maninaga. "Lord," Garuda told Vishnu, "this is very unfair. Other masters treat their servants really well. They give their servants gifts. See how Shiva has sent Nandi himself to rescue Shiva's devotee Maninaga. You never give me any gifts. Moreover, when I obtain something on my own, you ask me to relinquish it. It is proper on your part. It is on me that you ride when you go out to fight the demons. They get defeated because of my prowess, and yet it tickles your ego no end to think that you have defeated them yourself. Vishnu smiled and replied, Garuda, you are quite right. You have become thin and lean from bearing my weight. It is quite true that I can defeat the demons only because of your prowess. You have a lot of strength. Why don't you bear the weight of my little finger and demonstrate your strength? Vishnu placed his little finger on Garuda's head. So heavy was the finger that Garuda was crushed against the ground. Please forgive me, said Garuda. I have been very stupid. I am an ignorant ass, and you are the lord of everything. I have been completely flattened by the weight of your little finger. Please tell me how I may regain my old self. Vishnu asked Nandi to take Garuda to Shiva. Shiva would find a way of restoring Garuda's old appearance. Maninaga was released and Nandi took Garuda to Shiva. Shiva asked Garuda to bathe in Gautama Ganga. This would make his appearance normal again. Garuda did this. Not only was his old appearance restored, he became stronger and swifter than he used to be. The place where Garuda bathed is a tirtha known as Garuda Tirtha. Vishvamitra and god Indra. Many years ago there was a terrible drought. There was no food to be had. The sage Vishvamitra had come to the banks of the river Gautama Ganga with his disciples. Vishvamitra's wife, children and disciples were all hungry. The sage therefore sent his disciples out to look for food. They searched everywhere but could not find no food. The only object that they could find was the body of a dead dog. They brought this to Vishvamitra. We have no choice, Vishvamitra told his disciples. Clean the meat carefully with the water. Then offer it to the gods, the sages and the ancestors. This is what we have to live on. Offering the meat of a dog to the gods was unheard of. Indra adopted the form of a hawk and stole the vessel in which the meat was kept. But Vishvamitra got to know about this and got ready to curse Indra. Indra was naturally scared of Vishvamitra's curse. He changed the dog meat into Amrita, a heavenly drink, and brought the vessel back. I don't want Amrita, Vishvamitra told Indra. Bring the dog meat back. I don't want to have Amrita when the whole world is starving for food. There is no food available and I do not see any sin in eating dog meat. Now should there be a sin in offering it to the gods? Indra was the god of rain. He realized that the only way to pursue Vishvamitra against eating the dog meat was to make it rain so that there would be an end to the drought. Instructed by Indra, the clouds powered down rain. Vishvamitra and his disciples now consented to partake of the Amrita. The place where all this happened has come to be known as Vishvamitra Tirtha. There used to be a Brahmana named Shweta. He was a friend of the sage Gautama and had a hermitage on the banks of the Gautama Ganga. Shweta was also devoted to Shiva. In due course, Shweta died and Yama's messengers arrived to take Shweta to Yama. But they could not even enter Shweta's house. Finding that Yama's messengers were not returning, Yama's companion Chitraraka told Yama, "What do you think has happened? Why aren't the messengers returning?" Yama now sent his companion Mrityu to find out what was going on. Mrityu means literally death. Mrityu went to Shweta's house and found Yama's messengers, Yamaduta, standing outside the house. They explained that they were unable to enter the house because Shiva himself was guarding Shweta's body. One of Shiva's companions asked Mrityu, "What are you doing here? What do you want? I have come to take Shweta to Yama, replied Mrityu. His time on S is up. Mrityu flung a noose to grasp Shweta's body, but Shiva's companions struck Mrityu with a rod and killed him. When the news of this was taken to Yama, he was furious. With all his companions, he attacked Shweta's house. Nandi, Ganesha, Kartikeya, and several of Shiva's companions came to fight on Shiva's side, and a battle royal raged. All the gods arrived to meditate and end the strife. Things had got a bit of hand, and Yama himself had been killed by Kartikeya. The problem seemed to defy solution. Yama was, after all, performing his duty, but Shiva insisted that his devotees would never be taken to Yama, but would instead go straight to heaven. Shiva's condition was finally agreed to. Nandi brought water from the Gautama Ganga and sprinkled it on Yama and the others who had died in the fighting. They were all immediately brought back to life. God Kubera. Kubera was the eldest son of the sage Vishvamitra. Vishvamitra had two wives. The first wife gave birth to Kubera. The second wife was a Rakshasa, demon, woman, and gave birth to Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana. Kubera used to rule in Lanka, and his relation with his cousins were extremely good. But Ravana's mother did not like idea of her sons mixing so much with Kubera. She called her son and said, "What are you up to? Why do you cause me so much of pain? You are demons and Kubera is a god. It is proper that you should be so friendly with him." The relation between gods, suras, and demons, asuras, is one of enmity. Consider Kubera's pomp and glory. Have you got anything like that to show for your service? Do something so as to improve your own statures. That instructed by their mother, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana went off to the forest to perform tapasya. They pleased Brahma with their praise and desired the boon that they might win over the kingdom of Lanka. Ravana also obtained the boon that he would become very strong. Thus fortified with the boons, the demons attacked Kubera and defeated him. They drove Kubera out of Lanka. Kubera possessed a beautiful Vimana, named Pushpaka. This was also appropriated by Ravana. Ravana also made it known that whoever gave Kubera refuge would be killed by him. This means that no one dared give refuge to Kubera. Kubera sought the advice of his grandfather, Pulastya. Pulastya told him to go to the banks of the Gautama Ganga and pray to Shiva there. Shiva appeared before Kubera and blessed him. He granted Kubera the boon that Kubera would become the god of all wealth. In the Ikshvaku dynasty there ruled a king named Harishchandra. Harishchandra had no son. One day two sages named Narada and Parvata came to visit Harishchandra and told him that he would go to hell if he did not have a son. "How can I obtain a son?" asked Harishchandra. "Go to the banks of the Gautama Ganga," advised the sages. "Pray to the god Varuna there. We are sure that Varuna will grant you a son." Harishchandra pleased Varuna with his prayers and asked for a son. "You will have a son," said Varuna, "but there is a condition attached. You will have to subsequently organize a yajna in my honor, and you will have to sacrifice your son at this yajna. Tell me if this condition is acceptable to you." "Yes, indeed," replied Harishchandra. In due course, Harishchandra had a son who named Rohita. Varuna came to Harishchandra and asked, "What about the yajna in my honor?" "My son is still too young," replied Harishchandra. "Let him at least attain 10 days of age. Till then the baby is in any case impure and is not fit to be sacrificed." After 10 days Varuna came again and asked, What about the yajna in my honor? Please let him grow his teeth, replied Harishchandra. Animals are sacrificed at yajnas, and no one becomes an animal until he actually has teeth. Varuna waited till the teeth grew and returned when Rohita was 7 years of age. What about the yajna in my honor? He asked. There are only milk teeth, replied Harishchandra. These do not characterize an animal. Please wait until his proper teeth have grown. Varuna returned when the proper teeth grew and asked, What about the yajna in my honor? He is the son of a kshatriya, the second of the 4 classes in India, warrior class. Replied Harishchandra, but his training in the art of fighting had not even begun. He cannot be called a kshatriya until he knows how to fight. Till that day he is an incomplete man. Do you really want such an incomplete man as a sacrifice? After some years had passed, Rohita became skilled in the art of fighting and was appointed the heir apparent to the kingdom, Yuvaraja. He was then 16 years of age. Varuna appeared again and asked, What about the yajna in my honor? This time the entire conversation took place in front of the prince, and Rohita intervened before Harishchandra could say anything. Father, he said, I have already resolved to perform a yajna in Vishnu's honor. Grant me the permission to complete that first. After that, do what you will. Rohita went off to the forest. Meanwhile, Varuna had had enough, and he had afflicted Harishchandra with a painful stomach ailment. News of his father's illness was taken to Rohita in the forest. In the forest, Rohita met a sage named Ajigartha. The sage was very poor, and together with his wife and 3 sons was starving. We will sell one of your 3 sons to me, asked Rohita. The boy is needed for a sacrifice. I shall not sell my eldest son, said the sage. My wife will not permit the youngest one to be sold. You can have the one in the middle. His name is Shunashefa. The price will be 1,000 cows, 1,000 golden coins, 1,000 pieces of clothing, and a lot of wealth. Rohita paid the price and brought Shunashefa home to Harishchandra. We can do this, said Harishchandra. It is the duty of kings to protect the Brahmanas. How can we sacrifice the son of a Brahmana? It is better to die instead. Go and return Shunashefa to his father. Just then a divine voice was heard from heaven. The voice said, There is no need for anyone to die. Take Shunashefa to the banks of the Gautama Ganga and perform the yajna to Varuna there. Gautama Ganga is such a sacred river that no human sacrifice are needed if a yajna is performed there. This is what Harishchandra did, and Varuna was satisfied. As for Shunashefa, he was adopted by the sage Vishvamitra as a son. The sage Gautama had a son named Vriddhagautama. Vriddhagautama was also a sage, but he was very ugly. Besides, he had no nose, had never had one since he had been born. He was so ashamed of this deformity that he could not bear to join the other children of the sages in studying the Vedas and Shastras under a teacher. But Vriddhagautama knew some incantation, mantras, which he always chanted. He also worshipped the god Agni. When he grew a bit older, Vriddhagautama went out to tour to the world. He traveled to many places and met many people. Since he was deformed, he never got married. Who would want to marry a person so ugly as he? In the course of his travels, Vriddhagautama arrived at a mountain named Shitagiri. He discovered a beautiful cave in the mountain and thought that this might be a good place to live in. So he entered the cave and was very surprised to find an old woman inside. The old woman had obviously been living inside the cave for many years. Her body was thin and wasted from the rigors of severe tapasya. Vriddhagautama was about to touch the feet of such venerable old woman, but the woman restrained him. "Please don't touch my feet," said the woman. "You are my Guru. Does a Guru ever bow before his disciple?" Vriddhagautama was surprised at these words. This was the first time in his life that he had met the old woman. "How can I be your Guru?" he asked. "You are much older than me. Besides, I have never learned anything. You are clearly respected ascetic. Your words are complete mystery to me." "Let me tell you my story," said the old woman. "Otherwise you will not understand. There used to be a handsome and a brave prince named Vriddhagautama. He was the son of King Arishtasena. Vriddhagautama went on a hunt to the forest and arrived at that very cave. There he happened to meet an apsara named Sushyama. The two fell in love with each other and got married. But eventually Vriddhagautama had to return home and Sushyama gave birth to a daughter there. Sushyama left her daughter in the cave itself with the instruction that she was not to leave the cave. The first man to enter the cave would become her husband. It was this daughter who had now become the old woman. Vriddhagautama had reigned for 80,000 years. After that, Vriddhagautam's son had reigned for 10,000 years. All this while, Sushyama's daughter had lived in the cave. That is for 90,000 years altogether. "Now you see that you are to be my husband," said the old woman. "Is a husband not a Guru?" "What you say is quite impossible," replied Vriddhagautama. "You are much older than me. I am only 1,000 years old and you more than 90,000. How can we marry? I am like a child next to you. If you don't marry, I will kill myself," said the old woman. But I'm ugly," protested Vriddhagautama. "I will promise you this much. If I ever become handsome and learned, I will indeed marry you. I have pleased the goddess Saraswati, who presides over all learning, through my tapasya," said the old woman. "She will make you learned. I have also pleased the god Varuna, and he will make you handsome." Vriddhagautama became handsome and learned and married the old woman. They lived happily in the cave. One day various sages came to visit the couple. Among them there were learned sages like Vasishtha and Vamadeva. But there were also young sages who were not all then sensible. The youngest sages started to laugh at the sight of the young and handsome Vriddhagautama and his aged wife. "Who is this man?" they asked the old woman. "Is he your son or your grandson?" The sages went away, but the couple felt ashamed. They asked the sage Agastya what they might do. Agastya told them to go and bathe in the river Gautama Ganga. The river is so sacred that all one's heart's desires are thereby granted. The couple did this and prayed to Vishnu and Shiva. Wonder of wonders, the old woman became young and pretty. The place of the banks of the river where the wonderful things happened is a tirtha named Vriddhasangama. Many years ago there used to be a sage named Dadhichi. His wife was Lopamudra. Dadhichi's hermitage was right next to the holy river Ganga. Lopamudra's sister Gabhasthini also used to live in the hermitage. Such was the sage Dadhichi's powers that Daityas and Danavas dared not set foot inside the hermitage. The gods once fought with the demons and managed to defeat them. After the war was over, they came to pay their respects to the Dadhichi. Dadhichi welcomed his guests and wanted to know how they were faring. "Thanks to your blessing, we are fine," replied the gods. "We have just defeated the demons in a war. In fact, we have a slight problem. We no longer need our weapons now that the demons have run away. We don't know of a safe place where we can store all these weapons. We were wondering if we might keep the weapons in your ashrama. This is one of the safest places that can be found." Dadhichi consented to this proposal. The gods left the weapons in the hermitage and went back to heaven. When Lopamudra heard what Dadhichi had done, she was not at all pleased. "You have done something that is most improper," she told to her husband. "One should never accept responsibility for someone else's property, especially if one is an ascetic and has no material possessions on one's own. Moreover, you have agreed to store the weapons of the god. Does this not mean that those who are the god's enemies will look upon you too as an enemy? And what are you going to do if something should happen to the weapons? Will the gods not blame you then?" "Your points are well taken," said Dadhichi, "but I had not thought of them, and I have given the gods my word. I can't very well go back on my word now." 100 years passed. The gods did not return to collect their weapons. The weapons began to lose their luster. Dadhichi did not know how the energy of weapons might be preserved. He washed them with the holy water, and the energy of the weapons got dissolved in the water. Dadhichi then drank up the water. As for the weapons themselves, they faded away once their energy was gone. Finally, the gods came to claim their weapons. "Can we have our weapons back?" they asked. "Our enemies have become powerful again. We need our weapons." "That might be, but the weapons are no longer there. I have swallowed up their energy. Let me tell you what can be done. I will use the powers of meditation to give up my life. The excellent weapons can be made out of my bones." The gods were reluctant, but there was no other solution. Dadhichi died, and the gods requested Vishvakarma to make weapons for them out of Dadhichi's bones. Vishvakarma complied, and the weapon named Vajra that he made was truly remarkable. Lopamudra was away when his incident took place. She returned and found that her husband had died. She was afflicted with sorrow and wished to immolate herself in a fire. But she happened to be pregnant at the time, so that this could not immediately be done. Once the baby was born, she killed herself after having handed over the baby to a pipala fig tree for rearing. Since the pipala tree brought up the boy, he came to be known as Rishi Pipalada. Chandra was the lord over all trees. The trees asked Chandra for some amrita, for Pipalada and Chandra obliged. The amrita gave Pipalada a lot of strength. When Pipalada grew up, he wanted to know who his parents were, and the trees told him the story. Pipalada blamed the gods for his parents' deaths and decided to seek revenge. The trees brought Pipalada to Chandra. "You are still too young," said Chandra. "First you must become learned and well versed in the use of weapons. Go to the forest of Dandakaranya. The river Gautama Ganga flows through that forest. Pray to Shiva there, and I'm sure that your wishes will be fulfilled. Pipavada pleased Shiva through his prayers. What boon do you desire? Asked Shiva. I want the boon that I may be able to destroy the gods, replied Pipavada. I have a third eye in the middle of my forehead, said Shiva. The day you can see my third eye, your wish will be granted. Try as he might, Pipavada could not see Shiva's third eye. Pipavada therefore performed even more difficult tapasya for even more years. Eventually he managed to see Shiva's third eye. From Shiva's third eye was born a demon that looked like a man. What is your desire? Asked the demon of Pipavada. Kill my enemies, the gods, was the reply. The demon immediately attacked Pipavada. What are you doing? Asked Pipavada. Why are you trying to kill me? I asked you to kill the gods. But your body has been created by the gods, replied the demon. I will therefore kill you also. Pipavada ran to Shiva for deliverance. Shiva marked a region inside the forest for Pipavada. There the demon was not permitted to enter. Pipavada lived there, protected from the ravage of the demon. Meanwhile, the gods requested Shiva to save them as well. Shiva persuaded Pipavada to control his anger. He convinced Pipavada that nothing was to be gained by killing the gods. That would not bring his parents back. Pipavada agreed, but he wished to see his parents once. Accordingly, Vimana descended from heaven, on which Dadhichi and Lopamudra were seated. They blessed Pipavada and asked him to marry and have children. As for the demon, it became a river and merged with the holy Ganga. There was a city named Pratisthana. A king named Shurasena ruled in that city. Shurasena did not have any sons. After a lot of effort, a son was born to him. But the son happened to be a snake. The king and the queen were mortified at this turn of events. But they brought up the son in great secrecy. Not even the king's ministers and priests knew that the prince was a snake. When the prince grew slightly, he began to talk like a human. Even so, he was a snake. King Shurasena arranged for the prince's education. After the snake had become learned in the knowledge of the Vedas, he told his father, "Father, it is time for me to get married. If I do not have a son, I am certain to go to Naraka." King Shurasena was very surprised to hear this. "How is it possible?" he asked. "Which princess will consent to marry a snake?" "I don't know," replied the prince, "but I do know that I had to get married. Otherwise I will commit suicide." There are many forms of marriage that are permissible. Perhaps a princess can be kidnapped and married to me. Shurasena called his ministers and told to them, "My son Nageshvara has now come of age. He was also been made the heir apparent to the kingdom. There is no one equal to him in bravery on earth, in heaven or in the underworld. I am getting old. Please arrange for Nageshvara to get married. I shall then relinquish my kingdom and retire to the forest." The king did not, of course, tell his ministers that Nageshvara was a snake. Shurasena had an aged minister. This minister reported that there was a king named Vijaya, who ruled in the eastern part of the country. King Vijaya had 8 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter's name was Bhogavati, and she was very beautiful. She would be the right match for Nageshvara. The aged minister was sent as a messenger to Vijaya, and the king agreed to the match. There was a custom among Kshatriyas that the bride did not always have to be married to the bridegroom in person. She could also be married to the bridegroom's sword or some other weapon. The minister explained to King Vijaya that there were some private reasons which made it impossible for Nageshvara to come in person for the marriage. Bhagavati should be married off to Nageshvara's sword. Vijaya consented to this and the marriage ceremony was performed. The entire retinue then returned to the city of Pratisthana. But what was to be done now that the marriage was over? Nageshvara's mother sent a maid to Bhagavati. The maid was to tell Bhagavati that her husband was actually a snake and then observe her reaction. The maid told Bhagavati, "Your husband is a god, but he has the form of a snake." "That is my good fortune," replied Bhagavati. "Normally women are married to men. I must have performed many good deeds in my early life to have been married to a god." Bhagavati was then brought to Nageshvara, and at the sight of Bhagavati, Nageshvara remembered his early life. He used to be a snake Naga in his early life and was a companion of Shiva's. His wife in the early life was Bhagavati. There had been an occasion when Shiva had laughed at a joke of Parvati's and Nageshvara had also laughed. This had annoyed Shiva and he had cursed Nageshvara that he would be born on earth as a son of a human, but in the form of a snake. When he went and bathed in Gautama Ganga, the period of the curse would be over. When Nageshvara recounted these incidents to Bhagavati, she also remembered her early life. The two went and bathed in the sacred river, and Nageshvara obtained a handsome and divine form. Nageshvara ruled after Shurasena's death, and when Nageshvara and Bhagavati died, they went back to Kailasha to live with Shiva. On the banks of the Gautama Ganga, Nageshvara and Bhagavati built a temple to Shiva. This is a famous tirtha known as Nagatirtha. Years ago there was a war between the gods and the demons, and the gods lost. The gods came to Brahma for advice, and Brahma asked them to pray to Shiva. When Shiva appeared before them, the gods said, "The demons have defeated us. Please kill them and save us." Shiva went to fight with the demons. He drove the demons off from Mount Sumeru and out of heaven. He pursued them to the ends of the earth. All this exertion made Shiva sweet, and wherever the drops of sweat fell down on the ground, terrible ogresses named Matris were created. The Matris also started to kill the demons and pursued them down to the underworld. While the Matrikas were killing the demons in the underworld, Brahma and the other gods waited on the banks of the river Gautama Ganga. This place can be known as Pratisthana. When the Matrikas had killed all the demons, they returned to earth and began to live on the banks of the Gautama Ganga. This tirtha has come to be known as Matri Tirtha. Brahma used to have 5 heads. The 5th head was in the shape of a donkey's head. When the demons were running away to the underworld, this donkey's head addressed the demons and said, "You are running away. Why are you running away? Come back and fight with the gods. I shall aid you in your fight." The gods were alarmed at this paradoxical situation. Brahma was helping them in their fight with the demons, and Brahma's 5th head was trying to help the demons. They went to Vishnu and said, "Please cut off Brahma's 5th head. It is causing too much of confusion." "I can do what you want," replied Vishnu, "but there is a problem. When the cut off head falls on an ass, it will destroy the ass. I think you should pray to Shiva to find a way out. The gods prayed to Shiva, and Shiva agreed to cut off the head. But what was to be done with the severed head? The ass refused to bear it, and so did the ocean. Finally, it was decided that Shiva himself would bear the head. The place where Shiva cut off Brahma's fifth head is known as Rudra Tirtha. Ever since that day, Brahma has had 4 heads, and he is known as Chaturmukha. There is a temple to Brahma on the banks of the Gautama Ganga. This is a holy place known as Brahma Tirtha. A killer of Brahmanas is pardoned his sin if he visits this temple. A dove used to live on the banks of the Gautama Ganga. The dove's name was Anukhrada, and its wife's name was Heti. Anukhrada was Yama's grandson. Not very far away, there lived on an owl named Uluka. The owl's wife was called Uluki. The owls were descended from the god Agni. The doves and the owls were enemies. They fought among themselves continually. The doves had received all sorts of weapons from Yama, and the owls had received all sorts of weapons from Agni. These divine weapons threatened to burn up everything, but Yama and Agni intervened. They persuaded the owls and the doves to forget their enmity and live together as friends. The place where the doves lived came to be known as a Tirtha, named Yamya Tirtha. And the place where the owls lived came to be known as Agni Tirtha. There was a sage named Veda. He used to pray to Shiva every day. The prayers lasted till the afternoon, and after the prayers were over, Veda used to go to the nearby village to beg alms. A hunter named Bhiva used to come to the forest every afternoon to hunt. After the hunt was over, he used to come to Shiva's linga and offer to Shiva whatever he was that he had hunted. In the process of doing this, he often moved Veda's offerings out of the way. Strange though it might seem, Shiva was stirred by Bhiva's offerings and eagerly used to wait for it every day. Bhiva and Veda never met, but Veda noticed that every day his offerings lay scattered and a little bit of meat lay by the side. Since this always happened when Veda had gone out to beg for alms, Veda did not know who was responsible. But one day he decided to wait in hiding so as to catch the culprit red-handed. While Veda waited, Bhiva arrived and offered what he had brought to Shiva. Veda was amazed to discover that Shiva himself appeared before Bhiva and asked, "Why are you late today? I have been waiting for you. Did you get very tired?" Bhiva went away after making his offerings, but Veda came up to Shiva and said, "What is all this? This is a cruel and evil hunter, and yet you appear before him. I have been performing tapasya for so many years, and you never appear before me. I am disgusted at this partiality. I will break your linga with this stone." "Do it if you must," replied Shiva, "but please wait till tomorrow." Next day, when Veda came to present his offerings, he found traces of blood on top of the linga. He carefully washed away the traces of blood and completed his prayers. After some time, Bhiva also came to present his offerings and discovered traces of blood on the top of the linga. He thought that he was in some way responsible for this and blamed himself for some unknown transgression. He picked up a sharp arrow and began to pierce his body repeatedly with this arrow as punishment. Shiva appeared before both of them and said, "Now you see the difference between Veda and Bhiva. Veda has given me his offerings, but Bhiva has given me his whole soul. That is the difference between ritual and true devotion. The place where Bhiva used to pray to Shiva is a famous tirtha known as the Bhiva Tirtha. There was a city named Bhuvana. In that city there lived a Brahmana named Gautama. The Brahmana had a Vaishya friend named Manikunda. Gautama's mother gave him a lot of ill advice. As a result of this, Gautama told Manikunda, "Let us go to other countries to trade and make profits." "But my father has a lot of wealth," replied Manikunda. "What is the need to obtain more wealth? You don't have the proper perspective," said Gautama. "A successful person is the one who does not thrive on what is left to him by his father. He makes his own fortune." Manikunda was convinced by Gautama's logic. He did not realize that his so-called friend was out to defraud him. The two friends set out on their journey, Manikunda providing all the capital. In the course of their travels, Gautama remarked, "Have you noticed how those who follow the path of dharma always suffer? They are neither wealthy nor happy. There seems to be no point in being righteous." "Please don't say that," protested Manikunda. "Happiness lies in following the path of dharma. Poverty and misery are inevitable. They are of no account at all." The two friends argued over this but could not decide who was right. They resolved to have a bet. They would ask the opinion of others, and whoever lost the bet would surrender all his wealth to the winner. They asked many people for their opinions. Naturally, most people said that it was the evil who thrived and prospered, and it was the righteous who suffered. The upshot of this was that Manikunda surrendered all his wealth to Gautama. But Manikunda continued to praise dharma. "You are an utter ass," said Gautama. "Haven't you lost all your wealth to me? Let you continue to praise dharma." "The wealth is of no account at all," replied Manikunda. "Dharma is on my side, and your apparent victory is only an illusion. Dharma will triumph in the end." The two friends decided to have another bet. This time it was agreed that whoever lost the bet would have his two arms chopped off. They again asked several people, and most people said that it was dharma, evil, which triumphed. So Manikunda lost his two arms. "How does it feel now?" asked Gautama. "The same as ever," replied Manikunda. "What is impotent is dharma, and dharma is on my side." Gautama lost his temper at this. He threatened to cut off Manikunda's head if Manikunda persisted in his praise of dharma. But Manikunda was unperturbed. The friends decided to have another bet. This time it was agreed that whoever lost would forfeit his life. Manikunda lost yet again, and Gautama gouged out Manikunda's eyes and left him for dead. Manikunda lay on the banks of the Gautami Ganga and pondered about the fate that had befallen him. It became night. There was an image of Vishnu on the banks of the river, and the Rakshasa Vibhushana used to come there every night to pray to Vishnu. Vibhushana's son discovered Manikunda lying there and found out from him the entire story. He recounted the story to his father. Many years ago I had journey trauma in his fight with Ravana. Vibhushana told his son. Ravana's son Meghanada shot a venomous arrow at Rama's brother Lakshmana. Lakshmana fell unconsciousness. The monkey Hanumana then went to the Himalayas mountains and brought a mountain named Ganhamadana to Lanka. On that mountain there was a wonderful herb named Vishalyakarani, which cures all illnesses. When Hanumana returned the mountain to the Himalayas, a bit of the Vishalyakarani fell down at the spot, near Vishnu's image. Let us try and find it. We should be able to cure Manikunda. Father and son hunted for the herb. The Vishalyakarani had become a huge tree. They lopped off a branch and placed it on Manikunda's chest. Manikunda immediately regained his eyes and arms. After curing Manikunda, Vibhushana and his retinue returned to Lanka. Manikunda began to travel. He eventually came to a city named Mahapura, where a king named Maharaja ruled. Maharaja had no sons, only a daughter. The daughter was blind. Maharaja had announced that whoever cured his daughter would become his son-in-law and rule after him. Manikunda cured the princess with his knowledge of the Vishalyakarani. He then married the princess and became king of Mahapura after Maharaja. Many years later, Gautama was brought before Manikunda by the soldiers. He had been arrested on the charge of committing a crime. Gautama had lost all his wealth by then and was no more than a beggar. Manikunda pardoned his friend and shared with him whatever he had, such as the virtues of following the path of dharma. There are of many tirthas along the banks of the Gautami Ganga, where these wonderful accidents took place. There was a sage named Kandu. He had a hermitage on the banks of the Gautami Ganga. The Ashrama was a beautiful place, and the Kandu performed very difficult tapasya there. In the summer, Kandu meditated in the hot sun. In the monsoon, he meditated on the wet ground, and in the winter, he meditated dressed in wet clothing. Indra got scared as a result of all this tapasya. He thought that the sage Kandu might want to become Indra, the king of the gods. He therefore called an apsara named Pramlocha and told her, "Go and disturb Kandu's tapasya." Pramlocha went to the hermitage and began to sing there in a beautiful voice. This disturbed Kandu, and he discovered a beautiful woman wandering around in his ashrama. "Who are you?" Kandu asked the woman. "I have come here to pluck flowers," replied Pramlocha. "I am your servant. I will do whatever you wish me to." Kandu had fallen in love with Pramlocha and he married her. He forgot all about his tapasya, and Indra heaved a sigh of relief. Years passed. Pramlocha wished to return to heaven, but Kandu would not let her. After years and years had passed, Kandu came out of his hut, looking rather distracted. It was then evening and Kandu was obviously going somewhere. "Where are you going?" Pramlocha asked. "What a stupid question!" exclaimed Kandu. "Can't you see that it is now evening? I have got to go and observe the evening rites. The day has passed." "What day?" asked Pramlocha. "Several days have passed and several evenings have come and gone. Now you came here this morning, said Kandu. I go to my heart and it is now evening. I don't understand what are you trying to say. Explain yourself. It is true that I came here in the morning, answered Pramlocha, but that was a morning which dawned many years ago. Hundreds of years have passed since that day. How many years? Asked Kandu. When did you come here? 1600 years, 6 months and 3 days ago, replied Pramlocha. Are you sure? Asked Kandu. It seems like a single day to me. I'm sure, said Pramlocha. I dare not lie to you. You have dislodged me from my tapasya, responded Kandu. But I will not curse you, since you have been my wife. Go back to heaven. I have to atone for my sins. The sage Kandu went to Purushottama Kshetra and performed penance for his sins. He was blessed by Vishnu. Kandu and Pramlocha had a daughter named Marisha. The Brahma Purana also describes several other tirthas. Most of these are on the banks of the river Gautama Ganga. This is now identified as the river Godavari. After describing these several tirthas, the text describes accident in Krishna's life. This we will skip since they are described in much greater detail in other Puranas. There are 4 Varnas classes. Their names are Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. The duties of a Brahmana are to donate alms, perform tapasya, worship the gods, perform yajnas and study the Vedas. To earn a living, Brahmanas are authorized to teach and act as a priest at sacrifice. The duties of a Kshatriya are to bear arms and protect the earth, donate alms and perform sacrifice. A Kshatriya is also permitted to study the Shastras. The duties of Vaishya are agriculture, animal husbandry and trade. That apart, Vaishya should donate alms, perform sacrifice and study the Shastras. The duties of a Shudra are to serve Brahmans. Shudras can also be shopkeepers and artisans. In times of emergency, a Brahmana is allowed to adopt the livelihoods of Kshatriyas of Vaishyas to earn a living. In a similar fashion, a Kshatriya is permitted to adopt the livelihoods of Vaishyas or Shudras, and a Vaishya is permitted to adopt the livelihoods of Shudras. There are 4 ashramas, stage of life, as well. The first of these is known as Brahmacharya, celibate studenthood. During this period, the individual spends his days with his Guru and studies the Vedas well. He has to serve his Guru in proper fashion and live on alms. The next ashrama is that of householder stage, Grihastha. The individual now gets married and has children. He serves the gods, the sages, the ancestors and guests. It is household who provide alms for sages and hermits. That is the reason why the householder stage is so very important. The third ashrama is known as Vanaprastha, forest dwelling stage. The individual now retires to the forest and withdraws his mind from the earthly life. He can leave his wife in the care of his sons or take her with him. He lives on roots, fruits and leaves and makes a bed for himself under the trees. He is not permitted to shave or cut his hair, and his clothes have to be made out of bark or skins. The final ashrama is that of sannyasa, hermithood. A hermit gives up all association with the world and lives alone. He grows completely detached. He lives alone. He gets his food through begging. He is not permitted to spend more than one night in a village or more than 5 nights at a time in a city. A Chandala is an old caste. On the outskirts of the city named Avanti lived a Chandala. There was a temple of Vishnu in Avanti, and the Chandala was devoted to Vishnu. He was also a good singer. Ekadashi Tithi is the 11th lunar day. Every month on Ekadashi Tithi, the Chandala would fast during the day. At night he would go to Vishnu's temple and sing praises of Vishnu. He never failed to observe this ritual. The river Kshipra flowed by the city of Avanti. On one particular night on Ekadashi Tithi, the Chandala went to the banks of the river to collect some flowers for worshipping Vishnu. On the banks of the river there was a tree, and on that tree there lived a Brahma Rakshasa demon. As soon as the demon saw the Chandala, it wished to devour him. "Please not tonight," said the Chandala. "I have to worship Vishnu throughout the night. Let me go now." "Not on your life," replied the demon. "I have not eaten for 10 days, and I am famished. I cannot let you go. Please," said the Chandala, "let me go. I promise that I will come back once the prayers are over. You will then be free to do with me as you will." The demon let the Chandala go. The Chandala went to the temple. He worshipped Vishnu and spent the night in singing Vishnu's praises. Next day he returned to the demon. "I am indeed surprised," said the demon. "You are very trustful. You can't be a Chandala. You must be Brahmana. Answer my questions. What did you do all night?" "I stood outside Vishnu's temple and sang his praise," replied the Chandala. "For how long have you been doing this?" asked the demon. "For 20 years, was the Chandala's reply. "You have acquired a lot of punya, store of merit. Through this," said the demon, "please grant me one night's punya. I am a sinner." "No," replied the Chandala, "I will not part with my punya. I have given you my body. Eat me if you will, but the punya is my own." "Very well then," says the demon, "give me 2 hours worth of punya. I am a sinner." "I have told you that I will not give you any of my punya," replied the Chandala. "But what is your sin?" The Brahma Rakshasa related his story. His name was Somasharma, and he was the son of Devasharma. Devasharma was a righteous Brahmana, but Somasharma fell into evil ways. A Brahmana is not authorized to act as a priest in a sacrifice before he has had his sacred thread ceremony, Upanayana. But Somasharma became a priest at a yajna, even so his Upanayana had not been held. As a result of this sin, when he died, he became a demon. The Chandala was stirred to pity at this sad story and parted with some of his punya. The demon was delighted and expressed his gratitude. He went to a tirtha and performed penance. Thus it was that the demon was freed. What about the Chandala? He returned home and then left for a tour of all the sacred places of pilgrimage. At one such tirtha he remembered the story of his early life. He used to be a hermit, well versed in the Vedas and the Shastras. He used to beg alms for a living. Once he had obtained some alms, but some chiefs were then in a process of stealing cows, and the hoofs of the cows raised a cloud of dust. The dust fell onto the food, and the hermit threw away the alms in disgust. Since he had thrown away alms, he was born as a Chandala. After performing penance for this sin, the Chandala was pardoned. The word yoga means union. Yoga is thus a form of meditation that unites the human soul, Atman, with the divine soul, Paramatman, or equivalently with the divine essence, Brahman. Practitioner of yoga has to study the Puranas, the Vedas and history. He has to exercise restraint regarding the sorts of food he eats. The best forms of food are yogurt, fruits, roots and milk. Yoga should be practiced in a place that is pleasant. It should not be too hot or too cold there. Nor should there be one noise to distract the practitioner. Yoga has to be performed in a proper posture, asana. The practitioner concentrates the entire focus of his mind on the tip of his nose. He contemplates the form of the Brahmana. This can only be successful if one is detached and controls one's sense completely. If yoga is performed properly, there comes the knowledge that the same Paramatman is in all living beings. To think that living beings are distinct from one another is only to fall prey to one's illusions. All the elements have the same Paramatman in them. Ramaharshana said to the sages who had assembled in forest Nageshvara. Many years ago, the great Vedavyasa had recited the Adi Purana to sages. The sages had been delighted to learn the wisdom that was in the great Brahma Purana. Whatever Vedavyasa had told those sages, I have now recited before you. Everyone should listen to a recital of the Purana, be he as a householder or a hermit. A Brahmana who listens to a recital of the Brahmana Purana become learned, a Kshatriya become victorious, a Vaishya becomes rich, and a Shudra achieves happiness. One who listens to the recital faithfully attains all his wishes. The fruits of listening to such a recital are superior to visiting the most holy of tirthas or performing the most difficult of yajnas. Ramaharshana blesses the sages and returned to his own hermitage, with the express injunction that the secrets of the Purana should never be divulged to atheists who did not believe in God. I am sure that Ramaharshana injunction does not apply to you. Now that you have a flavor of the Brahma Purana, wouldn't you like to read the original text? There are, after all, many more stories in the original. Om Shakti Hrim, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayana, Om Sachitekam Brahma Hrim.